opening, Jonathan lectured in Jewish studies at Krakow's, I'm going to try pronouncing this, Jagiellonian. How'd I do?
That's pretty good.
Pretty good. All right, there you go. University for 6 years and founded the Gesher Association for Polish-Israeli Dialogue. A native of New York City, Jonathan moved to Israel in 1994, living for 7 years on a kibbutz in the Negev desert and serving for 2 years in a combat unit in the IDF before making his way to Poland in 2001. He is a founding member of, you just tell me how to pronounce this. Yeah, Prismiers. How'd I do? Terrible. Okay. B plus. All right. The Krakow Association of Christians and Jews, as I like to call it, and serves as vice president. He is also on the board of the Krakow branch of the Child Survivors of the Holocaust organization. I know we have some children of survivors here tonight, and JCC Global. Jonathan was awarded the Cohen Award for services benefiting the Jewish people in 2014 and the Polish Foreign Ministry B'nai Merito medal for his work promoting Poland in 2015. There you go. I'm sure there's been many updates since then.
Embarrassingly, no new awards.
Well,
Take those out. It looks bad.
no, those are impressive. So welcome. Thrilled to have you here. And I see a number of folks from our who are going to be on our trip. Yeah, I think can you hear me on that? Yeah, I'll just pass it back and forth. Thanks. And thanks to those watching on our live stream. Thank you a lot to Alex, Liz, our friends of the Federation for setting this up, and Galit as well, and Danny from our staff for their work. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Marcel to begin. And that is that with this trip we have coming up, we are going there because I got to choose where we were going. And as the rabbi, one of the privileges of being the rabbi, you get to pick where the trip is. And I agonized a lot because there's so many great places that that I was considering. Prague and Berlin and Vienna as a trip up, Spain, Morocco, places like this. And those are all, I'm sure, future trips. But I decided for our first non-Israel international trip that we were going to do this trip. If I were still on the fence, sell me. Why was this the right decision? Why should we go to Krakow as a synagogue? And what is there to offer in Krakow today for us?
Sure. Thank you. Is that how?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. What a pleasure to be here. And I am hypnotized by the menorah, but I'll try to focus. Well, if Tahiti is an option, all things, I love Krakow more than anything. I've been there 23 years, but if you can go to Tahiti, that's where I would go.
Next year.
Fair enough. We are a people of stories, and we are living through a difficult time. And the rebirth of Jewish life in Poland, in a place that so many of us so strongly associate with death and destruction and tragedy, is one of the great stories of the modern Jewish world. And great story because, like most drama, it's unexpected, it's counterintuitive, and it's shocking. The place that I live in the Jewish Quarter 80 years ago, and where our JCC is, 80 years ago was the absolute worst place on earth to be Jewish. There was no place you were more likely to be murdered for being a Jew than the community down the road from Auschwitz. And 80 years later, which is in living memory, so really not a long time, 80 years later, it is one of the easiest, safest, and best places to be Jewish, with Jews and non-Jews working together in the shadow of Auschwitz to rebuild a 1,000-year-old Jewish community. And we say, I shouldn't give it away, but we say you come to Krakow saying Kaddish and you leave saying Shehechianu, and it's a very life-affirming and something that really makes you appreciate being Jewish, and especially those of us who grew up knowing they're Jewish or come to being Jewish in a more traditional sense, being around these young people, hundreds, even thousands of young people who have found out that they have a Jewish parent or grandparent or great-grandparent, and that are literally knocking the doors down to reconnect and join something that they were denied, is something really wonderful. But I will say that I checked with the JCC. They told me to let you know that as of now, I don't think no one has reached out to us about a visit. So as much as we're talking now, we got to make sure that you do actually come not only to Krakow, but to the beating heart of Jewish life in Krakow, our JCC.
Let me see what we can do about that, because after Marcel's visit, we've now arranged a dinner with him and some of the folks that are from his community. I would love to do that as well in Krakow, and I believe in Warsaw we're now meeting with somebody from the Joint Distribution Committee, and so I think that one of the best experiences on trips is meeting the locals. So let me ask you with that, you touched on how you live in the that what 80 years ago was the absolute worst place in the entire world to be Jewish. And the trip that we did last year, we like to go overseas on odd number years is the game plan, and do something in North America the even number years. In 2024, our trip was to Atlanta and Alabama. And something that struck me when I was in Montgomery and staying in Montgomery, Alabama, was this would be a really challenging place. I thought Montgomery was a very charming city, very lovely city, but I thought to myself, this would be a very challenging place to live, knowing the history of it and knowing the amount of lynchings that happened here and stuff. And likewise, I have found Krakow to be one of the most beautiful, charming cities in all of Europe, but I'm curious that as a Jew, how is it to live there? I mean, there's this rich Jewish history there, yes, but that is the closest city to Auschwitz. It's only about, half an hour away from, an hour from Auschwitz, where millions of Jews faced horrific circumstances and horrific deaths. What does it feel like, I guess, to live there knowing that the streets you lived on, if you could turn back time 81 years ago, would be screaming?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that I've been living there for 22 years, 23 years, so clearly it's something that I've thought about and I deal with a lot. And I will say that when I'm out at night in the winter, and it's pretty cold, winter, although it's not as layers of Gore-Tex, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in wearing pajamas in Auschwitz and being freezing. So you do think about it a little bit, but I will say that to me, there's something larger at play, which is I think about the change, right? What is the delta? What happened? How dramatic it is that we're part of a people that's so strong and so resilient that in a place that was, screaming with or Jewish blood running, in the streets almost, or any kind of mental image you have of what happened there. And it was obviously difficult. 90% of Polish Jewry was murdered. More than half the victims of the Holocaust were Polish Jews.
And we say 90%, that's out of 3.3 million. That's not 90% of 10,000 people. That's 3.3 million. That means 3 million of Poland's Jews were killed in a 6-year period, basically.
Yeah, 3.1 million of 3.5 or something. So, but the idea that I walk into a building that had no security for the first 10 years that we were open, a gate that says stop by and say hi, walk into a preschool that's the first Jewish preschool to open in Krakow since the Holocaust. So the backdrop just shows me, it makes me feel that I'm part of a people that's so strong and so resilient that we're able to thrive not only in Salt Lake City and in Miami Beach and in Tel Aviv, but we're thriving where those atrocities happened. And it makes me incredibly proud, and I feel that I'm part of a people that, despite being victimized over the centuries, refuses to be victims. And what better sign of the strength of our people than the idea that we're able to thrive in the epicenter of the Holocaust. So in the beginning, it was strange for me a little bit, but you get over that very, very quickly. And it kind of, it's also, what role should the Holocaust have in our identity? And this is something that you would imagine the person who's in charge of the Jewish community center, Jewish community really, down the road from Auschwitz thinks about. How much of what they did to us should define who we are? And I will tell you that as a Jew living for 23 or so years next to Auschwitz, what I've come to understand for myself is that I'm Jewish despite Auschwitz, not because of Auschwitz, and that we should never be defined by what's done to us, but by the response to tragedy. And the Jewish response to tragedy has always been and must always be to rebuild. And I think our center and our community, which if you Google how many Jews are in Krakow, it says there are 100 Jews in Krakow, and we have 1,100 Jewish members in a city with 100 Jews. So, and I think post October 7th, historically, when a place has been reasonably safe for Jews and you could make a living there, make a living for your family, Jews found their way to those places, anywhere. If you think, for all of you, how did your families originally get out here, right? Probably it was like, okay, it's a place you can be Jewish there and be safe being Jewish, and there's a living to be made, so we're going to go there. That's why everywhere, you go to find Jews anywhere, that's the thing. Today in Europe, you don't have many places that fulfill both of those qualities, right? You have Western Europe, which is rich and getting very unsafe for Jews, and Eastern Europe, which is poor, and they're not too bothered about Jews at this point. And the sweet spot there in the middle, a place that's safe for Jews and a decent place to make a living, is really a place like Poland, and the largest country there doing that. That's been the case for 20 years. But the argument against Poland isn't an argument about today. The argument against Poland has been exactly what you said. How can I live in a place where such awful thing happened to people I know, to me, to my parents, to my grandparents? How can I live in a place? And I think post October 7th, there's a reckoning. And we no longer, considering in many ways, and I'm the most optimistic person in the world, so not to be all doom and gloom, but we live in a world that in most places, in many places, it's becoming increasingly difficult to live openly and safely as a Jew. And the idea that what happened to Jews 80 years ago in Poland gets pushed into the background when the Jewish world is getting less safe and Krakow and Poland is getting more safe. So I think that we find people moving to Poland in large numbers, and the Jewish community growing as it becomes people suddenly you can't put a red X through Poland anymore because of what happened 80 years ago, when today we look at a world and we see an increasingly unsafe world for Jews in most places.
Yeah. Got a couple more questions, then I'll open it up. So you talk about anti-Semitism and all that, and how, and this has been my experience too, that it's kind of ironic that the Eastern European countries, I felt safer being Jewish than, I'm not going to wear my kippah down the street in Paris, for instance. When I was in Paris most recently, a couple of years ago, I had like a 12-hour layover. I saw many ultra-Orthodox Jews, and I was just in awe of their bravery of being openly Jewish in Paris, from everything I've heard. But anyhow,
You can't just take off the kippah.
no, exactly. So the question I guess I have is, I have heard though that there has been controversy within Poland, that a few years back there was diplomatic disputes between Israel and the Polish about a Holocaust bill and things like that. How do you think relations are between Poland and the Polish government and the Jewish community in Poland, as well as Israel?
Yeah, so relations between the Polish government and the Jewish community. We have a new government. So the things that you're talking about a few years ago with the bill that was essentially talking about what you could say about who was responsible for the Holocaust was a previous government. And the previous government passed a stupid bill, and they realized that it had the opposite effect. They were trying to show that Poland wasn't anti-Semitic and wasn't responsible for the Holocaust, and the result of the bill was that everybody in the world got upset and found Poland to be more anti-Semitic and more responsible for the Holocaust. So it was a poorly worded, poorly thought out bill, but it wasn't really so much about anti-Semitism. It was more about Polish inability or unwillingness to see themselves as beyond victims. In other words, if Poles see themselves as victims, which is very much part of the Polish identity, then the idea that as victims they victimized others is something that shatters their worldview. So this
Basically a critical race theory almost.
Yeah, so it's not that relevant today, and it was the previous government. So we had elections. It was October 15th, the election, so nobody really paid much attention as the Jews because it was the week after October 7th. But we have good relations with this government. Relations with Israel are good. I think what's interesting is that, you would say that Poland and the Czech Republic have been overall, and again, you can't only look at any country by just who's in power at that moment. You have to take a few steps back. So in the last, relevant, no comment. So, for the last 30 years, Poland and the Czech Republic, which now has renamed itself as Czechia, by the way. If you don't know that, Czech Republic has changed its name. So Poland and the Czech Republic have been the two best friends of Israel in the European Union. So that continues. What's interesting, really, is that issues that arise between worldwide Jewry and Poland, or Israel and Poland, as nation to nation, are very little about today, right? It's very little about anything today, and all about Holocaust memory, right? And it's very much about this idea of how we see Poland, how Poland is seen, how Poland reacts to how it's seen. But if you think about it, if you say, I'm sitting here in Salt Lake and I want to learn about the Holocaust, and I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go to Europe and learn about the Holocaust. You don't go to Germany that perpetrated the Holocaust, right? You go to Poland, where it took place. And Poles say, wait a minute, we were invaded from one side by Germany. 16 days later, September 17th, 1939, we're invaded by the other side, by the Soviet Union. They divide up our country, occupy us, murder a lot of Jews, 6 million Jews, and then everybody blames us and forgets Germany. So it's obviously a little more complicated than that, but we live in Germany and we blame Poland. If you think about it, what Germany for is much different than what Poland, like any other country in Europe, should have done more to help the Jews, clearly. But I think when you talk about being in Paris, and if you go to France and spend a few days in Paris, you probably don't constantly think about the fact that the French were given a quota of Jews to put on trains by the Germans, and the French sent extra. Or Vichy France that was more than happy to get rid of their Jews. So Poland, it's a lot more complicated than we often think. And we often refer to Poland, which was under occupation, when there was no real Poland to refer to. It was individual Poles. So we all know that there were Poles that helped Jews and Poles that hurt Jews. And really the only question is about the ratio. And the previous Polish government sort of made it as they were very proud of the Poles that saved Jews. They didn't say, we hate the Jews, we don't care. They said, no, Poland was wonderful, they saved all the Jews. And I said, well, if that's the case, then you're not very good at saving Jews because they murdered 3.1 million of your fellow Polish citizens, whereas we, so it's just very much about that. So I think what it comes down to, and as community leaders, your primary concern is, what is the safety of my community? What is it like for my community? And I can tell you that walking down the street with a kippah, being openly Jewish, being a Hasidic Jew, Haredi, in Poland, I think there are a few places in the world as safe as it is today in Krakow to be openly Jewish, and that's based on 23 years living there.
And I do know that last time I was in Krakow, she's probably has passed at this point, but I got to meet a righteous Gentile who had been recognized by Israel, and also. While I'd never met this person, somebody I had a lot of admiration for was a priest from Krakow who helped save Jews, who eventually became the Polish Pope, Pope John Paul II. He's from Krakow, I believe. And so, my final question, then I'll give other people the opportunity to ask some questions, is I think what's challenging, you alluded to this with the Holocaust, one thing with Holocaust studies, I should say, is there's, even if we look just at Poland, so not even the 5 years preceding with the Nuremberg laws and things like this in Germany, but from 1938 or so to 1945, there's been more written about that 7-year period of history, of Jewish history, than the other 4,000 years of Jewish history combined. And one of the things that, while sadly, of course, Warsaw was completely leveled during World War II, one of the things that I appreciate both in Prague but also in Krakow, and that we'll see in Krakow, is that the Jewish quarter is well preserved, and you can go into synagogues, gorgeous synagogues, and you can see what the life was like before and the vibrancy of that community prior to the Holocaust. And when we talked to Marcel a couple of weeks ago, and his answer to why Budapest, why come to Budapest, was he said because Jews are in Budapest today, and Budapest is a growing Jewish community, a living Jewish community, a vibrant Jewish community, and it feels like and I thought that was a great answer because it feels like for many other places we go in Europe, it's looking at where Jews were. Like next month, I'll be in visiting the synagogue in Cordoba, Spain. There aren't, to my knowledge, Jews in Cordoba, Spain, or a community today in Cordoba, Spain. I'm looking at what once was. So what is, you said in 2008, this JCC got founded, and there's 100 Jews in Krakow, but actually 1,100.
A lot more than 1,100. 1,100 members in a community that they say has 100 Jews.
There you go. So probably like us, there's 50, there's God knows how many Jews in Utah, but most are not affiliated. Tell me, what is the Jewish community like today? What is if I'm moved to Krakow, what is there for me as a Jew in Krakow today? What's it like being a Jew there? What's the community like? And also, how is it growing? And who is that?
We'll put you to work as a rabbi right away. So yes, it is growing, and I mean it's a different. Also to understand when I say there are a lot more than 1,100, we're not talking about affiliated versus unaffiliated. You're talking about people that have Jewish roots that are still finding out about it. So it's a very different situation. And really, you're talking. I met my wife at our JCC, who grew up without knowing she was Jewish. She came to a Hanukkah party after finding out, and now we have a 3-year-old daughter that goes to our preschool. As I said, the first of its type since the Holocaust. So our community is a growing, thriving community. We have 58 Holocaust survivors in our community. We have a lot of young people that are finding out they're Jewish. Now we have a lot of also Ukrainian Jews. Our JCC has helped so far 400,000 Ukrainian refugees and counting, many of them Jews, which just to understand is our tiny little JCC is far larger number than any Jewish organization of any size in the entire world. So it can go through your alphabet of American Jewry, and our little JCC Krakow has helped 400,000 Ukrainian refugees. So that's a big part of it. And then some of them, not percentage-wise many, because 98% of those we've helped are not Jewish, but there are Jews from Ukraine joining our community now. Also, there are Israelis that since October 7th don't feel very safe living in other places in Europe. As you talked about, wearing a kippah in Paris. I wouldn't speak Hebrew with my daughter walking down the street today in Paris or Brussels. And in Krakow, you're very safe. And people are starting to find out about that. Our JCC is an incredibly, and you've seen our building, warm, welcoming, inclusive building. Almost everything going on in our Jewish community is being run through our JCC. So I mentioned preschool, Sunday school, family program, BBYO run through our JCC, Hillel run in conjunction with our JCC. We co-run the Hillel. We have Shabbat dinner. This past week there were 130 for Shabbat dinner. That's every week. We do that, about 80 to 90 locals. We have, we're the largest Hebrew provider. We have 350 people studying Hebrew, Yiddish class, Arabic class, publish a newspaper, have a choir. And I think what's remarkable is we have about 120,000 visitors a year come through our building. About 200 groups a year come through our JCC. So you better make sure to sign up because might not be space. I think it's wonderful being Jewish. In Budapest and Krakow, it's a very interesting situation. In Budapest, you have a lot of Jews. Right, the idea is that there's a lot of Jews, and really Marcel's challenge is how to get all those Jews to be connected, to feel Jewish. You have 100,000 Jews in Budapest. It's massive. No place anywhere in that part of the world has anything close to that many Jews. So you have a lot of Jews in Budapest and trying to figure out how to get them involved. We in Krakow have a tiny Jewish community, but a lot of people which have Jewish roots, and these people are knocking the doors down to connect. Right, so I think most communities of 20,000 Jews that a synagogue can't get that as many people as our little community has for a Friday night dinner. It's remarkable. We'll have something like between 300 and 400 people at Seder, right? Jews at Seder. The vast majority, 90-something% local Jews. So I think being Jewish in Krakow, first of all, the environment is very conducive to being Jewish. And there's a rich history, right? You have Jews who have been living in Poland for 1,000 years. How many of you have Polish roots? Exactly. So the reason to visit Poland, first of all, is that answer. 75% of American Jews have Polish roots. And this place that our families lived in for generations and generations and generations, because of the Holocaust, we almost exclusively see it through the prism of the Holocaust. And it's not in our interest. Yes, we need to reconnect Poland to the Jewish world. Yes, we need support from American Jewry. All of those things are true. But wearing my New York Jewish hat, we need to reconnect to the place that so many of us come from. It's unhealthy for us as Jews to be disconnected from the place where our families have lived for 1,000 years, many of them good, some of them bad, but many of them good as well. You know, if you're a Sephardic Jew, you're disconnected, right? Sephardic Jews you can't go to Alexandria and you said Cordoba and these great centers of Sephardic Jewish life. You can't go there and connect to the Jewish community. But you can in Poland, and we need to rebuild those ties and not only see Poland through, and you said it very well, through this period of 1939 to 1945, which is an awful period and an open wound still in the Jewish people. But at the end of the day, the Holocaust is something that happened to us, and the Holocaust was not a total loss for the Jewish people. And why do I say that? How can you say the Holocaust is so awful? It wasn't. The goal of the Holocaust was to get rid of European Jewry, and they failed. They failed. And we have to come to terms with that. And part of putting the Holocaust in, dealing with it as a Jewish people, is to put it into some kind of perspective. And, you know, I'm not saying, oh, the Holocaust, they tried to kill us, let's eat. We're not at that level yet. We're not there to make light of it. But no, but the Holocaust is something, there are still Jews thriving. And just one other point, these people that are finding out they're Jewish, and I mean dramatic ways, hundreds. We have 200 students in our Hillel, 200 Jewish students in our Hillel. The people, who are these people finding out they're Jewish? Who are they? They are the grandchildren, great-grandchildren even, they're descendants of, right, of either victims, survivors of the Holocaust or victims of the Holocaust. And what debt do we owe the victims of the Holocaust? We have Yom HaShoah, we light candles, we pray, we talk about the Holocaust, we make movies about the Holocaust, we read books about the Holocaust, and we watch TV shows about the Holocaust. And we mourn the almost complete destruction of European Jewry. But we have an opportunity that we never had, because that 6 million number is not the number of Jews lost, Jews murdered. And there's a larger number beyond that 6 million of Jews lost. And we actually can reach out and find these lost Jews and bring them back into the fold. And if the victims of the Holocaust are looking down and watching us, don't you think what more would they want to see than us doing all we can as a people to find their lost descendants and to bring them back into the fold? What an opportunity we have. And you, by coming to visit us and participating in that, you're part of that process.
Thank you. That's very powerful. And by the way, I know our trip was full to Eastern Europe. The drop deadline was the end of February, and sadly we had a few people whose circumstances changed. So we do have about 4 openings or so that are going to fill up. Well, we're going to close it by the end of this week. So if you were like, I really wish I had signed up, come talk to me. We can.
If you come on the trip and you don't love it, I will personally refund the entire cost of the trip.
There you go. There you go. I know how to get a hold of him now. He's at JCC Krakow. So what?
Personally, I'm an NGO leader of an NGO. I have no money, but
I know. Yeah, I went into this whole Jewish nonprofit thing, and then I found out there's for-profit, and I was like, oh, that sounds more lucrative. Anyway, so what questions do you all have?
Rabbi, do you mind if I tee up a couple of points that I think are questions?
Yeah, here, let me give this to you, Alex, so you can people on the live stream.
No. So I've been to the Krakow JCC.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The work that Jonathan's done over all this time, helping to rebuild community, creating programs, finding lost Jews there. But I thought it would be fun if you talked about for a couple of minutes, Jonathan, about the ride and how that promotes what you do for the Holocaust survivors you have. Even our friend Bernard, who I met, 95-year-old, turning almost 96, Holocaust survivor who does a ride with Jonathan. And then I think folks would be really interested to hear about the tie-in with the LDS Church and the humanitarian arm of the church and how they've helped you with Ukrainian refugees.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol. Let me get this to you. And every year, by the way, they do a big Christmas show that's watched by millions that the LDS Church does. And a couple years ago, they always feature some inspirational story. And a few years ago, it was on Nicholas Winton saving Sir Nicholas Winton and what he did. And they had his son there. It was very inspiring.
Sure. Thank you, Alex. So my favorite thing that we've done, really, I mean, there are two things. One is we created something called Holocaust Survivor Day, which is a day to honor Holocaust survivors, which if you think about didn't exist before. We have Yom HaShoah, we have January 27th. These are days where survivors are witnesses to tragedy, but we don't just honor and celebrate the survivors. That's not the primary point. And I thought, how is it there's no day for Holocaust survivors? My birthday is January 3rd. You know what that is in America? Drinking Straw Day. You can look it up. There's a day for everything. Secretary Day, Boss's Day, this day, that day. Holocaust survivors had no day. So we reached out to a Holocaust scholar, and we created this thing, Holocaust Survivor Day, which was celebrated last year in about 30 communities across the United States. So a nice thing to think about. We just honor and thank the survivors. It's June 4th in the states of, and we have to work on Utah. 2 years ago in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, the governors declared it Holocaust Survivor Day. So a day. Who deserves a day if not survivors? But anyway, that's one thing that I love that we've done. And the other, my favorite thing really is Ride for the Living. So we created a 60-mile one-day bicycle ride from Auschwitz to the JCC, going from the darkness to the light, retracing the actual path of the Jewish community, and by doing so, helping to support it. And it's grown and grown. There's a feature documentary called For the Living, which was based about our bicycle ride and looks at genocide around the world. It was just at Doc, Utah. Was that a thing? It just won some awards at Doc, Utah, and it's in festivals all around the U.S. But anyway, we do this bicycle ride. We have hundreds of people that come from all over the world. It's at the end of June, which is during the Jewish Culture Festival, which strangely is the largest Jewish culture festival in the world. In Krakow, Poland, started 35 years ago by two non-Jews, one of whom is still running it. So if I, a month ago or a week ago or even an hour ago, would have said, I'm giving you 1,000 guesses, where's the largest Jewish culture festival in the world? Right? Janusz, yeah. So something very interesting is going on in Poland, and really the which I didn't really talk so much about, is the safety aspect, but there's a tremendous amount of interest in everything Jewish among non-Jews in Poland. Something like not only that I've never personally experienced, but I've never heard about anything like that before. When I was teaching at the university, I had about 200 students all getting a master's degree in Jewish history, none of them Jewish, 3 years of mandatory Hebrew, 3 years of mandatory Yiddish. So anyway, the backdrop to everything that you're going to see is this environment that's completely going the opposite of the rest of the world, which is danger for Jews. In Poland, it's not only that it's safe, it's this fascination with everything Jewish. So this bicycle ride is at the end of June. You come, the ride itself is one day on a Friday, and we take care of the bikes and the helmet, insurance. We have doctors and motorcycles and chase vehicles and all of that. And the whole program is a 4-day educational, cultural program. You learn about Krakow, visit Auschwitz, you see the city and guides, and it's during this whole Jewish culture festival. And after the ride, we have a Shabbat dinner, and last year we had it 700 for the Shabbat dinner. This year it'll probably be about 750 for a Shabbat dinner after the bicycle ride. So it's really something very special. We have 2 Holocaust survivors that do the ride with us. I do it on a tandem with a 95, almost 96-year-old survivor named Bernard Offen, who is a survivor of 5 camps, who is remarkable. And there's another survivor who's 90 that comes and does the ride with us. And he did it when he was 80, 81, 82, the full ride. And when he was a 10-year-old boy, he was liberated from Auschwitz, and he walked back to Krakow to find his family. and we ride along the same path that he walked 80 years earlier. We ride 80 years later on that path with him, a survivor. So it's a remarkable ride. If you're a cyclist, then you'll appreciate, or a fan of the Tour de France, Greg LeMond did the ride with us a few years ago. We have last year, the Israeli ambassador did it, the American, it's kind of like a big thing that we do, which is exceptionally fun. I'll also tell you, and you mentioned, talk about today, I'll talk about with the church, but I did want to mention that today I spent some time with a woman named Miriam Volk. Does anyone know Miriam? You know Miriam Volk, who is a Polish Holocaust survivor who is 103. And she is just about the coolest, toughest woman that I've ever met. I spent 45 minutes with her today, and I was like, she straightened me out pretty good. It was pretty remarkable. But before that, Alex and I spent a lot of time with went to the learning about the humanitarian, especially humanitarian efforts of the unbelievable humanitarian efforts of the church, of the LDS Church. And the reason that happened is because we worked with them about our project to help Ukrainian refugees. They heard about the LDS Church, heard about our work with Ukraine. They approached us. They came to visit us, started to support our work with what we're doing, and then actually they were so excited about it that they brought a lot of higher-ranking people in the church, including Blaine Maxwell. Is that his name? Blaine Maxfield, who runs the whole humanitarian arm of the church. It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Who actually we spent some time with them today, and they came for Shabbat dinner, which is pretty fun. And so we started this very nice relationship. So we're still, just to understand a little bit, I mentioned 400,000 refugees. It's 98% of whom are not Jewish. We're still housing, feeding, providing psychological support to over 1,000 a week. That's 90% of whom are women and children. And we raised and spent $14 million doing so, which is 3.5 times our annual budget. And all of that money was raised from Jews, except for the money, pretty much all of it, maybe not every penny, but for the most part, from Jews in the United States, and except for the one major donor to our work besides the American Jewish community was actually the LDS Church. So, great.
Other questions we have. Let's see, Faye, go ahead. I'll repeat the questions for those.
Since you've been talking about the Ukrainian Jews and any of the Ukrainian refugees and the number that are in Poland right now, I had a chance a couple of years ago to actually have dinner with the UN ambassador from Poland. And one of the things that he said is that the original thought was that as refugees came from Ukraine, they would actually be spread out throughout Europe. They would go to other countries, but many of them ended up staying in Poland. Can you actually help us understand why that occurred?
Well, the Ukrainian refugees?
The Ukrainian refugees, a lot of them actually stayed in Poland.
And so Faye's question was that she learned that many of the Ukrainian refugees have stayed in Poland. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that the original, just to continue on that she heard from the previous or the Polish ambassador to the UN that the idea, the Poles thought that a lot of the Ukrainians would pass through. So both of those things are really true. You've had 7 million refugees have passed through Poland, Ukrainian refugees. Just to understand, Poland is a country of 38 million, so a little, maybe between a fifth and a sixth of the country population-wise. So for the United States, I'm going to say that's 65 million or so would be the number here to put it in American scale. So there are right now probably about 1.5 million refugees in Poland. So many of them have passed through. The reason they found a very warm, welcoming place in Poland. Culturally, they're close. It's not the same language, but if you speak Polish, you can kind of figure out Ukrainian and vice versa. Maybe like a Spanish-Italian situation, not quite Spanish-Portuguese, maybe Spanish-Italian. So similar, you can sort of fight your way through one language if you speak the other one. And they found a Polish society that has been incredibly welcoming. You know, our work is not in a vacuum. Our work is against the backdrop of Poles that just open their hearts, open their homes to these refugees. You know, everybody in our staff, and we have about think about 65 full-time staff in our JCC. It's the largest Jewish organization in Poland at this point. Almost everybody, and people are living in small apartments. It's a city. They're not, big houses. They don't have that much space like you guys have. And everybody had like a Ukrainian family on their living room, in their living room, sleeping on the sofa and doing it. It was all hands on deck dealing with this emergency situation that we all thought would last a few days or a week or two. And it's been more than 3 years. So I think what we did is start sprinting because that's what you do. And then didn't realize that we'd have to sprint for more than 3 years. So it's gotten very difficult just because the world has sort of moved past Ukraine. As a Jewish people, we now have, as a Jewish world, we have, our own crisis since October 7th, and it's become difficult to help these people. But if you think about it, why have we gotten this involved? And I mean, just, I walk into work every morning, and there are about 40 or 50 refugees lined up in front of our gate waiting to come into our free shop, which opened on the second day of the war and has never closed since the second day of the war. And why are we doing it? Why are we involved at this level? Why are we doing this much? Well, 80 years ago, the Jews were the victims. 80 years ago, we were marked for destruction by a different dictator. And what was the response of the world? Silence. Silence. And again, I don't mean to say the response of Poland was silence. I mean the response of the world was essentially silence. Of course, there were some heroes, as like you met, that risked their lives to save Jews, but for the most part, they met indifference. They met indifference. And 80 years later, our community has been given a chance, a rebirth. And, being the victim of genocide, our community, 90% murdered, we can say the world didn't care about us. That means that we don't owe anything to the world. Or we can say, wait a minute, we have a particular responsibility to try to prevent the suffering of others because of what our community went through. And this, to me, is the Jewish response, and this has been our response, led by our Holocaust survivors who have told me and tell me every day that this is what we must be doing, helping these people, especially because they didn't receive that help 80 years ago. And what a privilege. What a privilege to be in a position of your community going from, being the worst place on earth, being marked for death, 90% of the community being murdered, to 80 years later, not only our community doing well and feeling safe and people finding out they're Jewish and a Jewish preschool opening, all of these good things, but we're actually come far enough circle, not full circle ever, but far enough in the circle that we're now able to help hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian women and children. What a blessing to be able to do that.
Martin, I can get a question.
Two questions, Rame. The first one is, can you tell us how the current Jews who are finding out their Jewish origins, can you give us a sort of a profile of what's a sort of an average picture there? Where were they during the last 80 years and how did they come to where they are now?
All right, so to tell us a bit about the people who are discovering their Jewish roots, where have they been? What's their story? And you had a second question? Go ahead, just ask it that we get.
The second question was, what is the reason for the discrepancy between the 100 Jews in Poland and the membership of your
So, yeah,
JCC?
where are they getting this 100 Jews in Krakow number from when clearly it's much larger?
So I'll answer the second one first because that's kind of the easier one. The point is that nobody, I think, who was it? Maybe Dick Cheney a few years ago talked about the known known, the known unknown, right? Sometimes you know that you don't know something, but then there are things that you don't know, but you don't know that you don't know them. You follow? So I think the idea is that we have no idea. We don't really understand how many Jews there are because people just take this sort of like anecdotal, oh, there are no Jews in Krakow, there are 100 Jews in Krakow, and it's, I think, really fascinating, but we don't really, it's also hard to define. For example, young woman finds out young woman and she's 13, sees a lot of books on her shelf at home. She's from a city outside of Krakow, hour outside of Krakow, called, now it's Bielsko-Biała, but it was Bielsko and Biała, two separate cities, very Jewish. Sees a lot of books on her shelf, Jewish books, goes up to her mom and says, Ma, why are all these Jewish books on the shelf? Her mom goes, your grandmother was Jewish. Now, this is the mother's mother. She doesn't say, my mother's Jewish. She doesn't say, I'm Jewish. She doesn't say, you're Jewish. She says, your grandmother was Jewish. Just hearing that sentence alone gives you some idea. So this woman came to study in college in Krakow, got very involved with the JCC. She's an Orthodox young woman. She runs our education department. She's doing her PhD in Holocaust something. She's amazing. Now, she has the mother. You heard the mother's attitude of saying, like, oh, it's my mother. Like, nothing anti. It's not that she was going to church and that was the reason. It's just there's trauma. And the mother has siblings, and the siblings have children. So in that family, you have 12 people that have a Jewish mother. So we're not even starting to get into patrilineal, matrilineal, this, that, or form, halacha. 12 people in that family have a Jewish mother. One of them is engaged and feels not only engaged, like active. One of them would answer the question, are you Jewish? Yes. The other ones, if you ask me how many Jews are in that family, I don't feel comfortable saying 1 because 12 have a Jewish mother. But I don't feel comfortable saying 12 because those are our rules, and if they don't acknowledge them, then we can't just say, my rules say that you're Jewish, therefore you're Jewish. So I don't know what the answer is even in that one family. And that question and my answer illustrates the complexity of trying to talk about numbers of Jews today in Poland. So the best answer for me with that question would be based on my experience, pretty much knowing as much as anybody in the world knows about this specific issue, not about anything else, but that's one issue I do know about, emerging Polish Jewry. I'll say that my guess would be over their lifetime, 4 of those 12 will step forward and feel some pull, and my answer is that there are 4 Jews in that family. I mean, who knows, right? You have no real way of knowing. The other question was but the question of how do we get to that point? So in our general narrative, Jews lived in Poland, Jews were murdered in Poland, there were survivors. The survivors like Miriam left, she went to New Jersey and then eventually moved out here. They went wherever they could go, and that's the end of the story. And now when we go to a place like Poland, we're going there to learn about the past and to see ghosts. But not all the Jews left Poland. Some stayed, and it was a small number that stayed, but it's a small percentage of 3.5 million is still a lot of Jews. So Jews stayed in Poland. Jewish life limped on after the Holocaust. And during communism, it became difficult once again to be Jewish. The Soviet Union itself was anti-Semitic, which controlled Poland. And the Jews in Poland were sort of forced to go underground, go into hiding. So since 1989, 2 things have been happening. One is that the Polish non-Jewish community, which is essentially all of Poland, has become very interested in everything Jewish. I mentioned Jewish culture festivals, university, museums, this incredible interest, which has laid the groundwork, which has created an environment that's conducive to these people, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of these survivors that went underground, that hid their identity from the children to protect their children during communism, are now finding out they're Jewish. But the cool part of it, or finding out they have Jewish roots, but to me the fascinating part is they're acting on it. They're stepping forward to be Jewish. Right? You find out that you're Jewish and you don't tell anybody, and you stay in the closet, as it were. It doesn't move the needle for anyone except in your own mind. They're stepping forward, they're walking, and because there's an institution like ours, they have a destination and they can walk in and do that. Hundreds, I mentioned 1,100 members, hundreds of them, their first step, it wasn't that they joined the JCC and they were joining a JCC. Their walking through those doors was them rejoining the Jewish people.
Let's go Anita and then Tom. And
This is fascinating. I have so many questions, but
pick one.
instead of I'll pick one.
Okay. You can pick 2.
Spain and Portugal are giving citizenship to descendants of the Inquisition. Has Poland offered citizenship to Jews around the world to come back? and get
So the question was, we are seeing now, and a lot of my Israeli friends are actually taking advantage of this to get an EU passport, that Spain and Portugal are offering citizenship to the descendants of the Inquisition. And I know Germany, I believe, has offered citizenship to German people, descendants of Germans who survived or fled due to the Holocaust. Is Poland offering Polish citizenship to Jewish descendants of Poles who were persecuted?
Yes, it's like Germany and other countries. They're all in different ways, but Spain and Portugal is separate because they're saying if you 500 years ago you were that's a different one, and that's a lot of problems, and they open it and they close it, and there are issues with that. But but in the rest of Europe generally, if you countries like Germany, France, Poland, if your family was forced to flee, if your family was forced to flee because of World War II, because of the Holocaust, then you can apply and get citizenship. And we help a lot of people doing that. We send them to people. We have a genealogist on staff that helps them, but a lot of people around the world are trying. And it's Polish citizenship. You might be moved and excited by it or not, but it's citizenship of 27 countries in the EU. So the way to look at it is that way, which is a good thing to have.
But
So
not Jews who came before that.
yeah, it's not as if anybody that has Jewish roots, because that would be
120 years ago.
yeah, if you came in the 19th century, then you can't walk in and get a passport. It's more to do with World War II and the Holocaust.
Thanks. Let's see, Tom. I believe I said you might get our.
I've been to your center.
Did you like it?
Before COVID.
Say yes.
And so, first of all, not only congratulations and thank you, but it is a great experience. And I can't go on his trip because we can't go to the same place at the same time. But I'm going to be following.
It's like the
that.
president and the vice president can't be on the same plane.
Exactly, for something like that.
Mazel tov.
A few weeks after us.
My question really is, everybody wants to talk about the past. What I'd like to hear from you, what do you see as the biggest challenges that you will have in the future?
So what are the like we were talking about? Everybody talks about the past when it comes to Poland. We talked a bit about the present. What are the challenges for your community looking to the future?
Yeah, excellent question, and I look forward to. I'll give you my card. Make sure. There. I mean, what are we trying to do? We're trying to say that Poland was the heart of the Jewish world, right? And something like 70%, 300 years ago, 70% of the Jews in the world lived in Poland, right? It's huge. It's almost like Israel, like looking at Israel and the United States is what Poland was for the Jewish world. So we're trying to, I think the strength of the Jewish people, not only me, but my strong feeling, the strength of the Jewish people is our interconnectedness. There's a responsibility that we have for each other. It's very beautiful, and it's something, I don't want to say it's unique, but it's very special. And Poland, once the center of the Jewish world, has been cut off almost completely from the Jewish world because of the Holocaust and the communism. So a big part of what I'm trying to do is just to rebuild those bridges, right? So I want people, the challenge is for you to come to Poland and to say that it's Auschwitz, comma, not Auschwitz, period. Mm-hmm. This is a main challenge. Also for us, just in a more, mundane sense of things, our challenge is funding. We raise our entire budget overseas. 95% of our budget comes from American Jewish philanthropy, which probably has a lot to do with me traveling 6 months a year and speaking. So that's a challenge. This model is a tough one. People do pay for services in our JCC membership and all, but they're not joining a JCC as much as they're rejoining the Jewish people. And God forbid family was almost all murdered in the Holocaust. There's somebody survived. They find out they're Jewish. They gather up the courage to walk into our building, and then they can't afford it, and we lose another Jew to the Holocaust, right? So those are the things. But really, the thing that keeps me up at night is that we're not doing everything we can to reach out and find those lost Jews. And I think that we have an opportunity to not, if I put it differently, if we could say right now, wow, we can go back in time and save 100 Jews from being murdered in the Holocaust, or 1 Jew from being murdered in the Holocaust, or 1,000 Jews from being murdered in the Holocaust, we would do everything we could to do that, to save them from being murdered. Well, we can't. But the ones who are lost from the ones who are lost to the Jewish world, we actually can. And how do we not have the same urgency? I feel the same urgency, and I want the world to feel the same urgency that I feel to go out and find these lost Jews and bring them back. The same way that again, not to compare it, but we clearly, in the last year and a half since October 7th, have thought a lot about lost Jews and leaving our brothers and sisters behind, and that's not something we do. And these Jews are victims of history, and they were left behind, and I don't want to leave them behind.
Thank you. Let's see. I think Matthew's had his hand up for a while. So Matthew, you get the last question then, just because time's sake. But then if others have questions, maybe you can stick. I don't know if you're.
I will stay for. I will happily miss my plane tomorrow and stick around.
There you go.
Especially the weather's
We
not
will
so-
happily let you miss your plane. Matthew, you get the last question. Then if Jonathan said you could stick around if you got other questions, please.
I wanted to ask about the Jesse Eisenberg movie.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to send an email.
You know, it premiered here in Utah.
Yeah.
I saw it at Sundance
Yeah.
and since. And one of the things that was interesting, you talked about that controversial law in Texas government. It was made under that government and was funded by that government. And it was interesting the choices that were made, especially in that final scene where they visit the grandmother's house and meet the neighbors. And they did it in a very parve way, in a way that seemed intentionally designed not to offend the sensibilities of that government. And I was just curious if that came up at all in the way it was received in the Jewish community there. I know the new government loved the film and gave Jesse Eisenberg citizenship, right?
Wow.
But anyway, I was just curious.
So, question was, and you've seen the film?
Yeah.
So I was actually going to send out. I watched it over the weekend. I was going to send out an email to our entire trip saying, please, 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 before you go on this trip, watch A Real Pain with Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, because I think it so well shows kind of the complex feelings of American Jews going through this this trip that we're going to go on, and also can be a good reminder of, hey, what not to do on a group trip. Anyways, so don't be that guy sometimes. I was trying to think about our trip. Who's going to be the Kieran Culkin on our trip? So anyways, so the question was for Matthew was, with this film, A Real Pain, it was supported by the previous government of Poland that we talked about, but Matthew felt that there were sensitivities, particularly with the closing scene, as to not offend the Polish government at the time, but that the new government loved the film and I guess gave Jesse Eisenberg an honorary citizenship. So tell us a bit about how this film was received by the Jewish community of Krakow. And I don't believe
I
they
think-
went to Krakow.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things. First of all, I think you know Matthew. I think you know more about the film than I do. I will say, though, that I doubt that they had some type of creative control over things, just from understanding a little bit how film funding in Poland works, that they generally, you pitch them an idea, and if they generally like it, you'll get a grant. They're not saying, oh, and it's not contingent, and they're not holding out a pot of money, and at the end, if they see the, you know, so it's not, I don't think that would have been the case, that would have been affected by it. I can't say that it wasn't, but I don't think it would have been based on my understanding of these things. I mean, he committed the unforgivable sin of not coming to Krakow, which is, of course, I mean, come on, like clearly, it's difficult. So for us, so we've invited, and he didn't get citizenship because they liked the film and he got citizenship. He applied for citizenship. He decided when he made the film, he was exposed to things in Poland that he hadn't thought about beyond the context of the Holocaust, and he liked his time in Poland, and he qualifies because of Polish roots. Mm-hmm. So then he did it. I'm sure he got it faster than he would have if he weren't Jesse Eisenberg, but it wasn't like, oh, we like the film, thank you, here's honorary citizenship. It was like kosher. Let's say. So I've actually reached out. I know someone his agency is CAA, and I know someone whose son is friends with the agent. So I've reached out to him and invited him on the bicycle ride, which I think would be cool and fun for him and fun for us to have him. So it was, but in terms of how it was, it's like anything else. If there was a huge movie made about something, anytime there's something made about something that you know very well and it's kind of close to you, then you're always kind of like, oh, that's not realistic, and oh, we see it that way. I thought the film was interesting. What?
Like a play about the Book of Mormon.
Like a play about, exactly, for example. So,
Somebody would do that.
yeah, if somebody would ever make that kind of play or something, that would be interesting. So, yeah, so that's it. I thought it was an interesting film. I mean, it's hard, again, when you know something from the inside, it's hard not to be like, oh yeah, like see flaws in it. I thought it was interesting. I think for me, the most important thing is that it's helped create a dialogue about Poland beyond just the Holocaust and things that we're talking about. And sometimes you feel like you're a lone voice in the wilderness, and then somebody makes a movie about it, and there you go, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting. So I think it's great. I think it makes. I want people to come visit Poland. You ask me what do I want? I want people to come visit Poland, because I think I could talk about Poland for the next 6 hours, and spending some time there is obviously so much more powerful than hearing anything. So it helps people come to Poland, and I think it's great. The community generally was mixed. They weren't like, I think some people are like, oh, it's I thought people found it. No one was offended by it, and some people kind of liked it, and some people were like, nothing special. But that was it. It wasn't some, it didn't evoke massively, I think very powerful emotions either way in the community. I think people appreciated that he made it. No, I haven't heard anything negative about it. I was at the premiere in Warsaw that he was at, but he just was on the stage for a minute and left, so I didn't get a chance to harass him as I would have. So.
And even though I was surprised that in your words that Eisenberg did the unforgivable sin of not going to Krakow. It's like, how do you go to Poland and not go to the greatest city in Poland? But in a way, I kind of also appreciated it, because I feel like many people associate Poland with Auschwitz, and thinking this is going to be my third trip to Poland, and it'll be my third trip to Krakow, but I've never been to Lublin. This is where he goes, and this is going to be my trip, and so I'll be going to Lublin on this trip. So that'll be my first time there. Anyhow, I want to say on behalf of our community, dziękuję. Thank you so much for coming. We are so excited. Give me one of your cards, because I want to see what we can do to maybe join in on one of those. You got some of his cards? Cool. Thank you. And just please join me in thanking this wonderful man, Jonathan, and the work that the work he is doing to for not only preserving the past, but to build the future of Krakow's Jewish community and let it rise again. And so thank you, sir. And I know you say you could stick around. I'm sorry I didn't get to all your questions. You all had so many questions. Feel free to come up and ask him.